Okay, so let's take a look at variables, and I'm going to create a new file, a new Java class, and I'm going to call it variable types, because we're going to play with variable types today. And in the last video, I mentioned that you can type PSVM. It turns out you can also type main, and that's going to create this main method declaration. And this is a new, this is the box that we're going to play in. Later we'll discuss what that means and why we're doing everything within this method. But for right now, we're just going to worry about variable types. And there's a few that you're wanting to play with. The first are those primitive types: integers, doubles, Booleans, and characters. And so you'll see that I'm putting a // in front of each of these, and that's saying this is a comment that I don't want the compiler to worry about. It's not asking it, it's not a statement to do anything. This is just a comment to the human in the room. And so the first example of type is integers. So the first thing that we want to do is tell the compiler what variable type we have. And so if it's an integer, I want to make sure I tell it's an integer. And I do that by typing int, which stands for integer. And then I need to give the variable a name. And you might think to yourself, well, I've seen variables before in math classes, and typically they're things like x, y, and z. Now, while that's okay as far as Java is concerned, if I see something like x equals 25, I won't necessarily know what x is referring to. However, if I see something that looks like number of students in class equals 25, if I look back to this program at a later date, it's easy to understand what that variable is going to hold. It's holding the number of students in the class. And you'll see that the naming convention is such that we start at lowercase and we use whole words. We don't have any spaces between them, but to show the difference between each of the words in that descriptive variable name, I just increase, make the first letter of each of those words uppercase. And so it's always better to use things that are these longer names that are descriptive so that you can understand what you were doing when you come back to your program later. There's also the type of double. And with double, you have to write out the full word and then you have to give it another name. So maybe it's the length of a rectangle. And so I want to give it that descriptive word, length of rectangle. And maybe that's something like 12.5. Now, the unusual one that you'll see is Booleans. And a Boolean type, you actually write out Boolean. And this is going to be something that's going to take on the value of true or false. A Boolean variable holds either true or false. And you'll see later where we get to use this when we make decisions based on something. So we're going to say, if the class is full, do one thing. If it's not, do another. And we're going to make decisions based on things. So what we need is a Boolean value. And a Boolean value is that true or false. So we have Boolean variables that can hold the values true or false. We'll get to all of that later. But for now, we have this Boolean variable. And so it could be something to the effect of is full. And so this could refer to the class or something else. If you wanted to be more specific, maybe we could say class is full. And we're going to set that equal to false for right now. And you'll see that it shows up as a different color, but that's okay. Finally, there is another primitive type, and that is characters. And characters are things like A, B, C, just anything that you can type that one character on a keyboard, right? So it even includes different characters such as the asterisk or a question mark. But for right now, I'm just going to use a character, and the way that I define that character type is I type char. And then this could be first initial. So my first initial is A for Angela, and so I will set that equal to A. And what I need to do is put that in single quotes. And so those are different than double quotes. If I see something in double quotes, that's a string. If I see it in single quotes, I'm telling it it's a character. And so always remember that semicolon at the end of the line. It's the easiest thing to forget. Finally, so we've gotten through all of the primitive types and we're left with an important remaining one, and that is strings. Strings are what we use for output. They're what we use to hold words and phrases, so they have real value. And in fact, they're treated a little bit differently than all the other types, and that's because they're not a primitive type. And what that means is it's something that's made up of a bunch of other things. Strings can hold characters, right? If I have a string, which is my name, I'm going to put it in double quotes and I'm going to type Angela, and that's actually made up of the character A, the character N, the character lowercase g, E, L, and A, right? And so it's not a single entity, but it's comprised of a bunch of characters, and that's why strings are not called primitive. But again, this will all make sense as we get further. All that really matters right now is that you recognize that these are different types, and these are how we declare them. You can output all of these things. So we've played with output before, and we know that we have to use system.out.println. You can output the number of students in the class. If you're using IntelliJ, you'll see that, yes, it was a pain to type out that long number of students in class originally, but it no longer is. And that's because it recognizes the fact that that's something you might want to use. That's a variable that you have available to you. And so as soon as I typed num, it gave me that as a possible option. One of the things, so I can just output it as is, and that would just output, we can run this. And what we'll see is if I just have that one piece of output, it does all this other work, but the only thing that it outputs is the 25. And so that's not very descriptive to somebody reading that. So maybe I want to do something like number of students in class. And I can actually pass all of this information to output. And I do that by having the string number of students in class. And so we didn't think about the fact that we were using a string as soon as we put that output with the double quotes, but we were saying we're going to output a string and it's going to be number of students in class. And then you see here, I use this plus sign. And I said, basically what I'm telling it is I'm going to output a string, number of students in class, which is that plus this other piece. It's going to tag on this other piece. And what do you notice when I did that? There's a slight problem, isn't there? It says number of students in class, 25. There's no space. There's nothing to separate the two. So in fact, that's because what it's doing is it's concatenating the two. It's saying, I'm going to take whatever that first string is, and then I'm going to bunch up the second piece right next to it. And because there's no space between the two, it doesn't include it. All I have to do to fix that is add a space. And so I can do that, run it again, and I'll see that I get the output that I was hoping for. You can play with this. You can output all of these things. You can system. Another trick in IntelliJ, if you're using it, is you can type SOUT, and that will handle system.out.println for you. And if you do that, then maybe I want to output the length of the rectangle. And so first I'm going to describe it. Maybe this time I'll put a colon. And then I'm going to add whatever is held in that variable. And so what this looks like is I'm going to output the string length of rectangle, and then I'm also going to tack on to that whatever is held in the variable that I pass, so length of rectangle. So if I run this, we'll see that I get the number of students in the class, space 25, and the length of rectangle, colon, and then whatever was held in that variable, which happens to be 12.5. Note I can change this. So to change the output, I don't have to go in there and change anything other than what's held in the variable. So this time I'm going to put 57.9 and run it again. And what we see is the output changes because it's not relying on anything other than what's held in that variable length of rectangle. So all sorts of fun to be had. Play with this. See what you can do, and we'll come to arithmetic and playing with ints and doubles next.